I'm Captain Elena Ward, 35, a Navy officer with 8 years of service and 3 deployments behind me. I've spent my career proving I can lead under fire, solve problems no one else wants, and stay calm when everything's falling apart. For years, I kept doing the same at home, covering for my parents' indifference, swallowing my sister's mockery, trying to earn a kind of respect that was never coming. But when they skipped my engagement ceremony to celebrate something worthwhile in London, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been written off or humiliated by the people who were supposed to have your back? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to draw a line after being disrespected, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and taking your power back. What happened next might surprise you. The first cracks appeared long before the wedding. It started with small comments, my sister, Lydia, joking that I'd probably marry some sergeant with a jeep, and my mother, Caroline, correcting my posture when I was in uniform at dinner as if it were some kind of embarrassment. They never said it outright, but the message was clear. My career was tolerated, not celebrated. I'm Captain Elena Ward, and I've been in the Navy for 8 years. I've served on 3 deployments, earned commendations for tactical analysis, and built a reputation as someone who doesn't fold under pressure. But at family dinners, none of that mattered. What mattered was that Lydia had just been promoted to senior marketing director at some tech firm, and my mother could actually explain that job to her book club friends. When I got engaged, their reactions were muted, polite smiles, thin congratulations. My father, Richard, shook Mark's hand with the kind of grip that said he was doing me a favor. I caught him whispering to my mother later that night, "She's always been desperate to prove something." I didn't tell them much about Mark. They never asked. He was just someone I met through work, which was true enough. What I didn't mention was that Mark held a rank most officers spend their entire careers hoping to reach. I didn't mention it because it didn't matter to me, and I knew it wouldn't matter to them either. They'd already decided who I was, the daughter who chose camouflage over cocktail dresses. Then Lydia announced that she and my parents were finally taking that trip to London the same week as my engagement ceremony. Not the wedding. The engagement ceremony. The formal event where we'd sign paperwork, make it official in front of our command, and celebrate with the people who actually knew us. When I asked why they'd chosen that specific week, Lydia looked at me with that practiced smile she uses in client meetings. To celebrate something worthwhile. The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother looked away. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject to airline miles. It stung, but I didn't fight it. Years in the military teach you composure and silence. You learn to keep your face neutral when someone's yelling orders 6 inches from your nose. You learn to function on 3 hours of sleep and bad coffee. You learn that some battles aren't worth fighting because the other side isn't actually interested in peace. So I didn't argue. I didn't beg them to reconsider. I just said, "Have a good trip," and went back to planning an event they'd made clear they had no intention of attending. Mark noticed, of course. He's observant in that quiet way that comes from years of reading satellite intel and threat assessments. We were reviewing the guest list one evening when he set down his pen and looked at me. "They're really not coming? They're really not coming. Because they don't approve of the military, or because they don't approve of you?" I thought about that for a moment. "I think they're embarrassed that I didn't turn out the way they wanted." He nodded slowly, like he was processing tactical data. "Their loss." I tried not to think about it after that. I focused on work, on the ceremony details, on making sure everything was squared away. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd built a life outside their approval, that I'd surrounded myself with people who understood duty and service and showing up when it counts. But the night before the engagement ceremony, I sat alone in my quarters and stared at the empty RSVP cards I'd printed for them. 3 cards. 3 empty seats that would sit in the front row marked family of the bride. I thought about throwing them away. But something stubborn in me, the same thing that made me finish a 10-mile ruck march with a stress fracture, made me keep them. I wanted those empty seats visible. I wanted everyone to see exactly who hadn't shown up. The engagement day came. My friends from the base showed up: Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chin, who'd been my roommate during officer training, Petty Officer First Class Mike Rodriguez, who'd saved my life during a training accident in Guam, Commander Patricia Osei, who'd mentored me through my first deployment. The room filled with navy blue uniforms, pressed and starched, ribbons and medals catching the light. Several senior officers came too, people I'd worked under, people who'd written my performance evaluations, people who'd seen me at my best and my worst and decided I was worth investing in. Colonel James Harper, my current commanding officer, arrived early and pulled me aside. "Your family couldn't make it? They had other plans." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Their loss," he said, echoing Mark's words. "This is a good thing you're doing, Ward. Hall's a solid officer. You two are going to do good work together." The event was modest but formal: folded flags on the tables, a toast from Colonel Harper, official paperwork signed in triplicate. Mark stood beside me in his dress uniform, and when he slipped the ring on my finger, I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. More like certainty. These were my people. This was my family. The ones who showed up. My parents' absence filled the air like smoke anyway. People noticed the empty seats. A few asked quietly where my family was, and I gave them the same answer: they had other plans. No one pushed further. Military people understand loyalty, but they also understand when loyalty isn't returned. That night, after the ceremony, I checked my phone out of habit. Lydia had posted photos from London, champagne glasses clinking, a rooftop dinner overlooking the Thames, her arm around my mother, both of them laughing. The caption read, "Some celebrations actually matter." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I set my phone face down on the nightstand and tried to sleep. The next morning, the photo was everywhere. Someone had tagged me in it. Then someone else shared it. By noon, half my unit had seen it, and by evening, Mark had seen it too. He didn't say much at first. Just looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Finally, he set the phone down and took my hand. "Now I understand." "Understand what?" "Why you never talk about them. Why you flinch every time someone mentions family leave." He squeezed my hand gently. "They don't see you, do they?" I wanted to argue, to defend them, to make excuses about misunderstandings and different values. But I was tired of lying, especially to him. "No," I said. "They don't." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Then, do you still want to do this quietly? The wedding?" I'd told him I wanted something small. Private. Just us and a handful of witnesses at the base chapel. "Yes," I said. "I don't need a big production." He nodded, but there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Something that looked like determination. "Okay," he said. "Small and private. Just us." I believed him. I should have known better. Mark doesn't lie, but he has a different definition of small than most people. But that was still weeks away. For now, I just held his hand and tried not to think about 3 empty seats and a caption that said some celebrations actually matter. To understand what happened next, you'd have to know the history. Not just the engagement ceremony or the London photos, but everything that came before. The years of trying to earn approval that was never going to come. I grew up in a house where appearances were everything. My mother, Caroline, hosted charity luncheons and served on museum boards. My father, Richard, was a corporate attorney who measured success in billable hours and client retention rates. And Lydia was the golden one. Beauty pageants at 16, academic scholarships at 18, a marketing career that had her managing 6-figure campaigns by 25. She was everything my parents wanted: polished, profitable, and easy to explain at dinner parties. I was none of those things. I was the kid who took apart radios to see how they worked. The teenager who joined junior ROTC because I wanted structure and purpose, not because I was preparing for military service. The college student who shocked everyone by enlisting instead of finishing a degree in electrical engineering. When I told my parents I was joining the Navy, my mother cried like I'd announced a terminal illness. My father sat in silence for 3 full minutes before saying, "You'll grow out of this phase." I didn't grow out of it. I grew into it. Boot camp was brutal and clarifying. For the first time in my life, My worth wasn't tied to my appearance or my ability to make small talk at fundraisers. It was tied to whether I could complete the mission, follow orders, and have my shipmates' backs. I could do all three. The first time I came home in uniform, my mother asked me to change before dinner because the Hendersons are coming over, and you know how Barbara is about politics. I changed. I told myself it was about keeping the peace. Through the years, deployment to the Mediterranean, promotion to lieutenant, commendation for my work in communications intelligence, another promotion to lieutenant commander, then captain, they never came to a single ceremony. Not one. I'd send them the details, and they'd send back polite texts about scheduling conflicts and prior commitments. But I kept inviting them. Loyalty runs deep when you're raised to earn love through performance. I kept thinking that maybe the next achievement would be the one that finally mattered. Maybe the next rank. Maybe the next medal. It never was. Lydia's promotions, though, those were celebrated. Dinner reservations at expensive restaurants. Champagne toasts. Social media posts with dozens of congratulatory comments. So proud of our brilliant daughter, my mother would write, as if she only had one. I stopped bringing up my work around them. When they asked what I did, I kept it vague, communication stuff. Intelligence analysis. It's pretty boring. It wasn't boring. It was some of the most complex and important work I'd ever done. But they didn't want to hear about it, and I was tired of performing for an audience that had already left the theater. Then I met Mark. We were both attending a joint service conference on cybersecurity threats. I was presenting on signal intelligence protocols. He was 3 rows back, asking questions that told me he actually understood the material. Afterward, he introduced himself, Commander Hall. That was solid work you presented. Captain Ward. Thank you, sir. He smiled. We're the same rank, Captain. No need for the sir. That was the first sign that he was different. He didn't lead with ego. He didn't need to prove he was the smartest person in the room because he already knew his value. We started talking, first about work, then about everything else. I learned he'd grown up in Montana, enlisted right out of high school, worked his way up through sheer competence and discipline. He deployed 7 times, earned a battlefield promotion, gone back to school for his bachelor's and master's degrees while still serving full-time. But he never bragged. He just stated facts when asked, the way you'd report the weather. I didn't know at first that he worked in high-level defense intelligence. I didn't know his security clearance was 3 levels above mine. I didn't know he regularly briefed members of Congress and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He never led with his rank or his access. We met as equals, soldier to soldier. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the family member who'd chosen the wrong path. I was just Elena, and that was enough. 6 months into our relationship, he took me to dinner at a quiet restaurant off base. We'd been talking about our families, his were supportive but distant, living their own lives in rural Montana, and I'd been more honest than usual about mine. They've never come to a ceremony? He asked. Not once. Not even your commissioning? My mother said she had a migraine. My father had a deposition. Lydia was at a conference. He was quiet for a long moment, turning his water glass in slow circles on the table. Then, you deserve better than that. It was such a simple statement, but something about it cracked open a part of me I'd kept carefully sealed. I felt my throat tighten, and I looked away, blinking hard. I'm used to it, I said. That doesn't make it okay. He reached across the table and took my hand, and I realized this was what partnership felt like. Not someone who needed me to be different or better or more palatable. Just someone who saw me clearly and decided I was worth showing up for. 3 months later, he proposed. We were on a weekend trip to Annapolis, walking along the waterfront near the Naval Academy. He stopped at a bench overlooking the bay and pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. I'm not good at speeches, he said. But I know what I want. I want to build a life with someone who understands service and duty. Someone who shows up. Someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. He opened the box. I want to build that life with you. The ring was simple, white gold, single diamond, elegant and understated. Exactly right. Yes, I said. Absolutely yes. We sat on that bench for another hour, watching boats drift across the water, talking about logistics and timing and all the practical details that come with two military careers. We decided on a 6-month engagement to give us time to coordinate leave schedules and plan something small. When I called my parents to tell them, my mother's response was, "Oh, well, that's nice, dear. What does he do?" "He's in the military." "Like me." "Oh." A pause. "Well, I'm sure you'll be very happy." My father got on the line. "Congratulations, Elena. Have you set a date?" "Not yet. We're thinking 6 months out. I'll send you the details when we have them." "Sounds good. We'll check our calendars." That was it. No excitement. No questions about Mark or how we met or what our plans were. Just polite acknowledgement and a promise to check calendars. Lydia's response was even worse. I texted her the news, and she replied 3 hours later, "Congrats. Is he active duty? Hope you know what you're getting into, LOL." I stared at that message for a long time. Hope you know what you're getting into. As if I were some naive kid marrying the first person who showed interest. As if my 8 years of service hadn't taught me exactly what military life required. I didn't respond. Mark saw the whole thing. He didn't comment on their reactions directly, but that night, as we were falling asleep, he said, "You know you don't need their approval, right?" "I know. Do you though?" "I thought about that. I'm working on it." He kissed my forehead. "Work faster. Life's too short to spend it trying to impress people who've already decided not to be impressed." He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two very different things. Still, I had 6 months to figure it out. 6 months to plan a wedding and build a life with someone who actually saw me. I thought that would be enough time. I thought I could make peace with my family's indifference before the wedding. I was wrong. After the London stunt, something shifted. Not just in me, but in the way I saw the entire architecture of my relationship with my family. It was like suddenly seeing the blueprint of a building you'd been living in for years, all the load-bearing walls, all the places where the foundation had been cracking for decades. I didn't cry. I didn't call them. I didn't fire off an angry text or demand an explanation. I just sat in my quarters the night after the engagement ceremony, looking at the photo of them in London, and realized I'd been fighting a one-sided war for years. Every achievement, every uniform I'd pressed to perfection, every commendation I'd quietly hoped they'd ask about, it was all a silent plea for their validation. And yet, when I finally found real partnership, when I finally built something with someone who understood duty and respect and showing up, they left the country to make a point. Some celebrations actually matter. That caption wasn't careless. It was deliberate. Lydia had written it knowing I'd see it, knowing everyone I worked with would see it. It was a public statement. Your life doesn't matter enough to cancel a vacation. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for them. They're busy. They don't understand military culture. They show love differently. But this wasn't about different love languages or cultural gaps. This was about respect, and they'd made it clear they had none to give. Lieutenant Commander Chen stopped by my quarters around 2100 hours. She knocked twice, then let herself in when I didn't answer fast enough. "You doing okay, Ward?" "I'm fine." She sat down on the edge of my desk, arms crossed. "That's not what I asked." Chen's one of those people who sees through evasions like they're made of glass. We'd known each other since officer candidate school, had deployed together twice, had covered for each other during inspections and crises and hangovers. She'd earned the right to push. "I'm processing," I said. That photo was cruel. It was honest. Cruelty and honesty aren't the same thing. She leaned forward. "You know that, right? You know that you didn't deserve that." I wanted to agree with her. I wanted to feel righteous anger instead of this hollow ache in my chest. But mostly I just felt tired. "It doesn't matter," I said. The ceremony happened. Mark and I are engaged. Whether they were there or not doesn't change anything. "Except it does," Chen said quietly. "Because you're sitting here alone instead of celebrating with your fiancé." She was right. Mark had given me space tonight, reading my need for solitude the way he read tactical situations, quickly and accurately. But that didn't mean I should be wallowing. "I'll be fine," I said. "I just need to adjust my expectations." Chen stood up. "Your expectations were that your family would show basic decency." "That's not a high bar, Elena." They're the ones who failed, not you. After she left, I pulled out my laptop and started going through emails. There were 17 new messages, mostly work-related, but 3 from extended family members who'd somehow seen Lydia's post and were just checking in. I deleted them without responding. Then I opened the folder where I'd been keeping wedding planning documents. Guest lists, venue options, catering quotes. We talked about keeping it small, maybe 50 people, mostly colleagues and close friends. The base chapel, followed by a reception at the officers' club. But as I scrolled through the potential guest list, I started noticing names I recognized from briefings. People Mark worked with whose ranks I hadn't fully processed. A rear admiral who'd mentored him early in his career. A brigadier general he'd served under in Afghanistan. And then, casually mentioned in an email from 2 weeks ago, a note from Mark's aide, confirmed SecDef's attendance, pending schedule. SecDef. Secretary of Defense. I sat back in my chair, staring at those words. Mark had said he wanted to keep things low-key. He'd said we'd have a simple ceremony with close friends. But apparently his definition of close friends included people who testified before Congress and made decisions that affected global security. I should have been intimidated. Maybe I should have been angry that he hadn't fully explained who might attend. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. My family had dismissed Mark without ever meeting him, had assumed he was just another service member they could overlook. They'd made their judgment based on nothing but their own biases and their long-standing disappointment in my choices. They had no idea who I was marrying. They'd never bothered to ask. The next morning, I met Mark for breakfast at the base commissary. He was already there when I arrived, reading through classified briefings on a tablet, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. "Morning," he said, looking up. "You sleep okay?" "Well enough." I sat down across from him. "We need to talk about the guest list." He set down the tablet. "Okay. Your aide mentioned the Secretary of Defense confirmed attendance." "Did she?" He looked genuinely surprised. "I told her to send regrets on my behalf. He doesn't need to spend his time at a junior officer's wedding." "I'm a captain." I stopped. "What's your actual rank, Mark?" He'd always just said commander when we met, and I'd never pushed for details. Rank mattered in professional contexts, but in personal relationships, I'd always believed it was just a job title. He smiled slightly. "Major General. Though I expect to make Lieutenant General next cycle if the promotions board goes well." I blinked. "Major General. 2 stars. That put him in the top 1% of military leadership. And he just casually mentioned it like he was telling me his shoe size. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered? I thought about that. No, but it explains a few things. Like why the SecDef wants to come to our wedding. That? And why your small ceremony is starting to look like a Joint Chiefs meeting. He reached across the table and took my hand. I can make calls. Keep it small if that's what you want. These people respect boundaries. They'll understand. I looked at him, this man who'd somehow managed to reach the highest levels of military leadership while staying grounded and kind. This man who'd proposed on a bench in Annapolis without any fanfare or performance. This man who my family had never bothered to meet. "No," I said slowly. "Don't make calls. Let them come. Let's do this properly." "You sure?" I thought about 3 empty chairs and a caption that said some celebrations actually matter. I thought about years of trying to shrink myself to fit into their version of acceptable. I thought about Mark's hand in mine, steady and certain. "I'm sure," I said. "My family wanted to make a statement about what matters." "Fine. Let's show them what actually matters." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But this is still about us, Elena. Not about proving anything to them." "I know," I said. And I meant it. This wasn't about revenge or showing off. It was about finally, fully stepping into the life I'd built. The life they'd never valued. If they happened to see it and regret their choices, that was their problem, not mine. We finished breakfast and went our separate ways, him to a briefing at the Pentagon, me to a training session with my communications team. But all day, I felt something settling in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Something steadier than that. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of hope for something that was never going to come. That night, I unblocked my family's numbers long enough to send one message to all three of them. Wedding details attached. You're welcome to attend. No hard feelings if you can't make it. Polite. Professional. Distant. I didn't expect them to respond, and they didn't. At least not for 2 more months, when everything had already been set in motion and there was no going back. By then, it wouldn't matter anyway. The wedding planning took on a life of its own after that conversation with Mark. I'd expected simple logistics: book the chapel, arrange for an officiant, maybe order flowers. Instead, I found myself coordinating with his aide, a sharp lieutenant colonel named Patricia Vasquez, who approached wedding planning like a military operation. "Captain Ward," she said during our first meeting, "I need to confirm a few details for security clearances." Security clearances? For a wedding? When you're marrying a 2-star general who works in strategic operations? Yes, ma'am. Everyone who attends needs at least a basic background check, and anyone entering the reception area needs to be cleared through SECFR. SECFR. Security Forces. I'd heard that term in briefings about protected facilities and high-value targets, not weddings. How many people are we talking about? I asked. She pulled up a spreadsheet. Currently 73 confirmed, with another 22 pending responses. Of those, 41 require enhanced security protocols. I stared at the numbers. 73 people. This was supposed to be small and intimate, just close friends and colleagues. But apparently when you're marrying into the upper levels of military command, close friends includes people who brief the president and make billion-dollar defense decisions. Does Mark know about all this? General Hall approved the preliminary list, yes ma'am. Though he did request we keep it under 100 total. Under 100. That was his version of small. I should have been overwhelmed, but instead I felt something else creeping in, a dark kind of satisfaction. My family had skipped the engagement ceremony to make a point about what mattered. Now they'd see exactly what they'd dismissed. No, that wasn't fair. This wasn't about them. This was about Mark and me and the community we'd built together. But still, they'd see. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was in my office reviewing intelligence reports when Lieutenant Commander Chen knocked and walked in without waiting for permission. "You need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. It was Lydia's Instagram story. She'd posted a screenshot of a news article with the headline, "Pentagon General to Wed Fellow Naval Officer in Private Ceremony." The article was brief, just a few paragraphs noting that Major General Marcus Hall, Chief of Strategic Operations, would be marrying Captain Elena Ward in a ceremony at Fort Myer. It mentioned both of our service records, Mark's recent promotion, and the fact that several high-ranking officials would be in attendance. Lydia's caption read, "Wait, is this my sister? Elena? Why didn't anyone tell me she was marrying a general?" Below that, a flurry of comments from my extended family. Aunts, cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly very interested in my life. "Did you know about this? Caroline, is this true? Your daughter is marrying a Pentagon general. Why wasn't this mentioned at Christmas?" I handed the phone back to Chen. Interesting timing. They didn't know? I told them I was engaged to someone in the military. They never asked for details. Chen smiled, not kindly. So they're finding out through the news that they skipped an engagement ceremony for a wedding that's going to have the Secretary of Defense in attendance. Apparently. That's got to sting. It probably did. I tried to find satisfaction in that, and came up empty. Mostly I just felt tired. Even now, even with everything that had happened, part of me wished they'd cared enough to ask. To show the smallest interest in my life before it became something they could brag about. My phone buzzed. Then again. I picked it up to find 17 missed calls. My mother, my father, Lydia. Text messages flooding in, "Elena, why didn't you tell us? We need to talk about the wedding. Your father and I would like to be there. Can you call me? This is important." I set the phone face down on my desk and went back to my intelligence reports. Chen watched me. "You're not going to respond?" "Not right now. They're probably losing their minds." "Probably." She sat down in the chair across from my desk. "You know they're going to try to insert themselves into this. Your mother's going to want to help plan. Lydia's going to want to be a bridesmaid. Your dad's going to want to walk you down the aisle. The wedding's in 2 weeks. Everything's already planned. That won't stop them from trying. She was right, of course. By that evening, I had 42 missed calls and 37 text messages. My mother had left a voicemail that started with, "Elena, sweetheart, I don't understand why you've been shutting us out," and ended with her crying about how they'd always supported my choices. Always supported my choices. The same woman who'd asked me to change out of my uniform before dinner parties. Who'd never attended a single promotion ceremony. Who'd gone to London instead of my engagement celebration. I called Mark. He answered on the first ring. "You okay?" he asked. "They know. They're calling and texting. They want to come to the wedding. Do you want them there?" I thought about that. I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes because they're still my family. But part of me knows they only care now because it's suddenly impressive. Because there's something in it for them. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet." I haven't responded. He was quiet for a moment. "This is your call, Elena. They're your family. If you want them there, I'll make it happen. If you don't, that's okay too. But whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not what you think you should want." That was the thing about Mark, he never told me what to do. He just helped me see the situation clearly and trusted me to make my own decisions. "I'll think about it," I said. "Take your time. We've got 2 weeks." But as it turned out, I didn't need 2 weeks. The next morning, I woke up to another Instagram post from Lydia. This one was a photo of her at brunch with my parents, all 3 of them dressed up and smiling. The caption, "Family meeting about some very exciting news. So proud of my little sister. Can't wait to celebrate with her. Hashtag proud family, hashtag military wedding, hashtag proud family." I stared at those words. She'd hashtagged proud family after posting "Some celebrations actually matter" just weeks earlier. She'd gone from mocking my engagement to claiming pride in my wedding, and the only thing that had changed was her knowledge of who I was marrying. I screenshot the post and sent it to Mark with a single line, "This is who they are." His response came immediately, "Understood. Your call." I sat with that for a while, my phone in my hands, the wedding 2 weeks away, my family suddenly desperate to be involved in something they'd already dismissed. Then I opened a new message to all 3 of them. "I appreciate your interest in the wedding. Unfortunately, the security clearance process for guests closed last week, and we can't add anyone new to the approved list at this late stage. Perhaps we can get together afterward. Professional. Polite. Final." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The responses came within minutes. "Elena, please, we can expedite clearances. Your father knows people. Don't shut us out of this. We're your family. This is ridiculous. You're being petty." I read each message once, then set my phone to do not disturb. Chin stopped by again that afternoon. "Did you tell them?" "I told them the guest list is closed." "How'd they take it?" "About as well as expected." She grinned. "Good for you." "Is it?" "I don't know if I'm setting boundaries or just being vindictive." "You're protecting your peace. There's a difference between setting boundaries and being vindictive, and you're firmly on the right side of that line." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel confident that I was making the right choice. But mostly I just felt sad that it had come to this, sad that they couldn't see me clearly until there was something in it for them, sad that my wedding was going to happen without my birth family present. But also relieved. Relieved that I wouldn't have to perform for them. Relieved that they wouldn't turn my wedding into a photo opportunity or a chance to network with high-ranking officials. Relieved that the day could be about Mark and me and the community we'd actually built together. 2 weeks later, everything would change again. But in that moment, sitting in my office with Chin, I felt something I hadn't felt in years around my family, clear. The choice was made. The boundaries were set. Whatever happened next, I'd handle it on my own terms. The wedding went forward. I told Mark I wanted to keep it simple, just a small chapel on base, nothing elaborate. But when I arrived that morning, escorted by Lieutenant Commander Chin and Commander Osei, I realized simple wasn't possible anymore. The base chapel at Fort Myer sits on a hill overlooking Arlington National Cemetery. It's a modest building, white stone with tall windows, the kind of place that's hosted thousands of military weddings over the decades. I'd chosen it specifically because it felt intimate and unpretentious, a place where the focus would be on the commitment, not the spectacle. But when our car pulled up, I saw the security perimeter immediately. Military police stationed at every entrance. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows parked discreetly near the side entrance. A Secret Service agent speaking quietly into his wrist calmed Jesus, Chin muttered from the passenger seat. How many VIPs are in there? Commander Osei, who was sitting beside me in the back, squeezed my hand. You okay, Ward? I think so. You don't have to do this. We can turn around right now if you want. I almost laughed. And disappoint the Secretary of Defense? He'll understand. This is your day, not his. But she was wrong about that. This wasn't just my day, it was the day I was choosing to fully step into the life I'd built. The life my family had never valued. And that meant facing everyone inside that chapel, whether I felt ready or not. We walked in through the side entrance, and I was immediately surrounded by activity. Mark's aide, Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez, appeared with a tablet and a schedule. The officiant, a Navy chaplain I'd met twice before, wanted to review the ceremony order. A photographer, official military photographer, not someone we'd hired, was setting up equipment near the altar. Captain Ward, Vasquez said, we're running about 5 minutes behind schedule. General Hall is in the groom's room with Colonel Harper and a few others. You'll be in the bride's room until we're ready to start. Do you need anything? Water? Coffee? A moment alone. I'm fine, I said automatically. She studied my face. You're sure? I'm sure. She nodded and stepped back, but Chin and Osei flanked me protectively as we walked toward the bride's room. Through the open door of the main chapel, I caught a glimpse of what waited inside. Rows of uniforms. Dozens of them, maybe more. Navy dress whites and blues, Army service uniforms, Marine Corps dress blues, Air Force service dress. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows caught on medals and ribbons and brass buttons, turning the chapel into something that looked more like a Joint Chiefs meeting than a wedding. Holy hell, Chin breathed. I recognized faces as we passed. Admiral Richardson, who'd overseen my last deployment. Brigadier General Santos, who'd written one of my recommendation letters for captain. Major General Patricia Coleman, one of the few women to reach 2-star rank in Army intelligence. These weren't just wedding guests, these were people who shaped military policy and strategy at the highest levels. And scattered among them, looking slightly overwhelmed, were my friends from earlier in my career. Petty officers and junior officers I'd served with, people who'd never been in the same room with this much brass before. The bride's room was quiet and mercifully empty except for Chin and Osei. I sat down in front of the mirror and tried to steady my breathing. My dress was simple, white, floor-length, cap sleeves. Nothing elaborate or expensive. I'd bought it off the rack at a bridal shop in Alexandria because I didn't want to spend thousands on a dress I'd wear once. But looking at myself in the mirror, I felt suddenly inadequate. Everyone out there was dressed in formal military attire, medals and ribbons on display, and here I was in a department store dress. You look beautiful, Osei said quietly. I look terrified. That too. But mostly beautiful. Chin knelt beside my chair. Elena. Look at me. I met her eyes. You've deployed 3 times. You've briefed admirals and senators. You've made decisions that affected operational security and intelligence operations. You can handle walking down an aisle and saying, I do. This is different. Why? Because there are important people watching? Those people are here because they respect you and Mark. Because they want to support you. This isn't a test or an evaluation. It's a celebration. I wanted to believe her. I tried to let the words sink in and calm the anxiety churning in my stomach. There was a soft knock on the door, and Colonel Harper stuck his head in. Captain Ward? May I come in? Of course, sir. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He was in his army dress blues, and I'd never seen him look more formal or more serious. I wanted to check on you before things get started, he said. How are you holding up? Honestly, sir? I'm overwhelmed. He smiled slightly. I imagine so. I've been to a lot of military weddings, but I've never seen a guest list quite like this one. I didn't expect it to be such a production. That's because you don't realize how respected you are. Both you and General Hall. He paused. Your family isn't here. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, sir. I'm not going to pry. But I want you to know that the people out there, they're your family too. Maybe not by blood, but by choice and shared experience. That counts for something. My throat tightened. Thank you, sir. You've earned every bit of respect in that chapel ward. Don't forget that. He straightened. Now, are you ready? Because I believe I have the honor of walking you down the aisle. I blinked. Sir, General Hall asked if I would. He said you don't have family present, and he thought you might like to have your commanding officer do the honors. I told him I'd be proud to, but only if you're comfortable with it. I looked at this man who'd mentored me for 3 years, who'd fought for my promotions and defended my decisions to skeptical superior officers, who'd shown up to my engagement ceremony when my own father couldn't be bothered. I'd be honored, sir. He offered his arm. Then let's go get you married. The walk from the bride's room to the chapel entrance felt both endless and instantaneous. Chen and Osei walked ahead of us, taking their seats near the front. Vasquez appeared with last-minute instructions about timing and processional order. The photographer positioned himself near the doorway. And then the music started, something classical and military, played on the chapel organ, and the doors opened. The entire chapel stood. Every single person, from the Secretary of Defense in the front row to the junior enlisted sailors in the back, stood at attention as I entered. Not because protocol required it, but because they chose to. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the altar, but I couldn't help seeing them in my peripheral vision. Rows and rows of uniforms, standing straight, showing respect not to my rank or my position, but to this moment. This commitment. And at the end of the aisle, waiting at the altar, was Mark. He was in his army dress blues, his rank insignia polished and precise, ribbons and medals arranged perfectly on his chest. But what struck me wasn't the uniform or the rank, it was his expression. Calm, steady, certain. Looking at me like I was the only person in the room. Colonel Harper walked me down the aisle slowly, with military precision. When we reached the altar, he placed my hand in Mark's and stepped back to take his seat. Mark squeezed my hand gently. You okay? He murmured. Getting there. The chaplain began the ceremony. I barely heard the opening words, something about honor and commitment and the bonds formed through service. I was too focused on Mark's face, on the steadiness of his hand in mine, on the feeling of being seen and chosen and valued. When the chaplain asked us to face each other for our vows, Mark spoke first. His voice was clear and unwavering. Elena, I promise to stand beside you in every deployment, every challenge, every quiet moment and crisis. I promise to see you clearly, to value your service, and to build a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. I choose you today and every day forward. Simple. Direct. Perfectly him. Then it was my turn. I'd written and rewritten my vows a dozen times, trying to find words that captured everything I felt. But standing there, looking at him, I realized I didn't need elaborate language. Mark, I promise to meet you as an equal, to trust your judgment, and to build a life together that honors both our service and our commitment to each other. I promise to show up, always, the way you've shown up for me. I choose you today and every day forward. The chaplain smiled. By the power vested in me by the United States Navy and the laws of Virginia, I now pronounce you married. General Hall, you may kiss your bride. Mark leaned in and kissed me brief, appropriate, tender. The chapel erupted in applause. And then the chaplain said something I hadn't expected. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you General Marcus Hall and Captain Elena Hall. Captain Elena Hall. My new name. My new identity. Not Ward anymore, Hall. The chapel stood again as we walked back down the aisle together. I caught glimpses of faces as we passed, Admiral Richardson nodding in approval, General Coleman wiping tears from her eyes, my friends from earlier in my career grinning and applauding. We stepped out into the sunlight and photographers swarmed, military press, official photographers, even a few civilian media who'd somehow gotten clearance. Mark kept his hand on my back, steady and protective, as we navigated through the crowd toward the reception area. How are you doing? He asked quietly. I just married a 2-star general in front of the Secretary of Defense. You just married me, he corrected. The rest is just context. I laughed, surprising myself. He was right. This wasn't about rank or politics or proving anything. It was about choosing each other. The reception was being held in the officers' club, a short walk from the chapel. By the time we arrived, the room was already filling with guests, uniforms mixing with the few civilian attendees, conversations happening in clusters around high-top tables. Secretary of Defense Alan Rhodes approached us almost immediately. He was a stern-looking man in his 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that suggested he didn't miss much. General Hall, Captain Hall, he said, shaking both our hands. Congratulations. That was a beautiful ceremony. Thank you, sir, Mark said. We appreciate you taking the time to attend. Wouldn't have missed it. You're both excellent officers, and seeing you commit to each other this way, he paused, smiling slightly. It reminds me why I believe in the people who serve this country. He moved on to speak with other guests, and I realized my hands were shaking slightly. Mark noticed immediately. You need a break? I need about 5 minutes where I'm not performing. He scanned the room, then guided me toward a quiet corner near the windows. Stay here. I'll handle the greeting line. Mark, I can't just— Yes, you can. This is your wedding day, Elena. You're allowed to take a moment. He kissed my forehead and walked back into the crowd, and I watched him navigate between groups with ease, shaking hands, making small talk, representing both of us with the kind of grace that came from years of political maneuvering. I stood by the window, looking out at the grounds of Fort Myer, and tried to process everything that had just happened. I'd gotten married. In front of the Secretary of Defense. With my commanding officer walking me down the aisle because my father had chosen London over my engagement ceremony. And somehow, impossibly, it had been beautiful. Chin appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. You survived. Barely. You did more than survive. You looked happy up there. I was. I am. I took the champagne. This is insane, right? This whole thing. Completely insane. Also completely perfect. She clinked her glass against mine. To Captain Elena Hall, who finally realized she doesn't need her birth family's approval to build something real. I drank to that. And as the reception continued around us, toasts from Admiral Richardson, a speech from Colonel Harper, dinner served by staff who seemed slightly awed by the guest list, I started to relax into the reality of what I'd just done. I'd married Mark. I'd built a life that my family had never valued. And I'd done it surrounded by people who actually showed up. The story hit the evening news within hours. I didn't see it until later, but Vasquez showed me the clip on her phone. Pentagon General Mary's fellow naval officer in private military ceremony. The footage showed us walking out of the chapel, Mark in his dress blues and me in my simple white dress. The reporter's voiceover mentioned both our service records, Mark's position at the Pentagon, and the impressive roster of military leadership in attendance. Private ceremony. Impressive roster. It would have been funny if it weren't so public. That night, back in our hotel room, exhausted and still in our wedding clothes, my phone started buzzing. I'd turned it back on out of habit, forgetting what that might unleash. 79 missed calls. Texts flooding in faster than I could read them. Voicemails piling up. My mother, Elena, we saw the news. We had no idea. Please call us back. My father, this is unacceptable. You should have told us who he was. We would have made arrangements. Lydia, you got married to a Pentagon general and didn't invite your own family? What is wrong with you? I scrolled through them all, message after message, each one some variation of shock and hurt and accusation. Not one of them said congratulations. Not one acknowledged that they'd chosen London over my engagement. Not one took responsibility for the fact that I'd invited them and they'd declined. Mark was in the bathroom, and I was glad he couldn't see my face as I read through the messages. I didn't want him to see how much they still had the power to hurt me, even now, even after everything. But then I got to Lydia's final message, sent just 20 minutes ago. Everyone's asking why we weren't there. This is humiliating. You've made us look terrible. How could you be so selfish? Selfish. She'd called me selfish for getting married without them, after they'd publicly mocked my engagement and chosen a vacation over my ceremony. I stared at that word for a long time. And then I started blocking numbers. My mother. Blocked. My father. Blocked. Lydia. Blocked. Every extended family member who'd suddenly remembered my existence now that there was something impressive to talk about. Blocked. Mark came out of the bathroom and found me sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. Elena, I blocked them all, I said. Every single one. He sat beside me and pulled me against his chest. I cried into his uniform shirt, probably ruining the pressed fabric, but he didn't seem to care. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For bringing all this drama into your life. Your wedding day shouldn't have been about my dysfunctional family. He pulled back to look at me. Our wedding day was about us. They're just noise in the background. And you dealt with that noise the way you deal with any threat. You neutralized it. By blocking them? By protecting your peace. That takes strength, Elena. Don't apologize for it. I rested my head on his shoulder, exhausted but also relieved. The calls would keep coming, probably. The texts would pile up on blocked numbers. But I wouldn't see them. I wouldn't have to perform or explain or justify my choices anymore. I was Captain Elena Hall now, wife of Major General Marcus Hall, part of a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. My family had left for London to celebrate something worthwhile. They'd made their choice. And I'd made mine. For months, they tried everything. Emails sent to my work address, which I filtered directly to trash. Messages relayed through extended relatives I barely knew, asking me to just talk to them. A letter from my father, forwarded through military mail, that I returned unopened with "return to sender" written across the front. My mother tried calling Mark's office directly. His aide, Vasquez, handled it with professional efficiency. General Hall does not take personal calls during duty hours. If you'd like to leave a message, I can pass it along. My mother left 3 messages. Vasquez passed along exactly none of them. Lydia tried the social media route, posting vague messages about family betrayal and cutting off the people who raised you. When that didn't get a response, she switched tactics and started posting photos from our childhood, me and her at the beach, at birthday parties, at Christmas morning, with captions like, "I miss my sister," and "Family should stick together." Chin showed me the posts one afternoon during a coffee break. We were reviewing intelligence reports in my office when she pulled up Instagram on her phone. "You seeing this?" she asked. I glanced at the screen. Lydia had posted a photo of us from high school, her in a homecoming dress, me in jeans and a navy ROTC t-shirt. The caption read, "She used to tell me everything. I don't know what changed." I handed the phone back. She knows exactly what changed. She's getting a lot of sympathy in the comments. Let her have it. I'm not interested in fighting for public opinion. Chin studied me. You're really done, aren't you? I'm really done. And I was. The anger had faded weeks ago, replaced by something steadier, indifference. I didn't wish them harm, but I also didn't wish them anything. They'd become background noise, static I'd learned to tune out. But I'd learned something crucial in service, something I'd tried to explain to Mark one night as we lay in bed after a long day. Silence can be stronger than confrontation. They want a reaction, I said. They want me to engage, to defend myself, to explain why I blocked them. But the moment I do that, I give them power again. I make it a negotiation instead of a boundary. Mark ran his fingers through my hair absently. You don't owe them an explanation. I know. But part of me still wants to. Part of me wants to list every ceremony they missed, every dismissive comment, every time they made it clear my life didn't matter as much as Lydia's. Would it change anything? No. Then save your energy for things that actually matter. He was right. While they scrambled to explain their absence and rewrite history to make themselves look better, I focused on the life I was building. Joint deployments, strategic work, real respect. The kind of partnership where both people show up consistently, not just when it's convenient or impressive. Mark never gloated about the situation. He never said, "I told you so," or pointed out how badly they'd miscalculated. He just said, quietly, when I needed to hear it, "You don't owe them an explanation." In the public eye, our story had become something else entirely. Articles appeared in military publications about power couples in modern service. A feature in Navy Times highlighted our parallel careers and how we balanced two demanding positions. Someone even wrote an op-ed about how our wedding represented the evolution of military culture, less hierarchical, more partnership-focused. But privately, it was simpler than that. It was just two people who understood duty and showed up for each other consistently. No performance, no conditions, no scorekeeping. 3 months after the wedding, I got promoted to commander. The ceremony was held at the Pentagon, in one of the formal rooms usually reserved for flag officer promotions. Mark pinned on my new rank insignia while Admiral Richardson read the promotion orders. My family wasn't there. I didn't invite them. Colonel Harper was there, along with Chan and Osei and Rodriguez and a dozen other colleagues who'd supported me over the years. The Secretary of Defense sent a letter of congratulations that was read aloud during the ceremony. Afterward, at the small reception, Admiral Richardson pulled me aside. "Commander Hall," he said, smiling slightly at the name, "I wanted to tell you that your work in communications intelligence has been exceptional. You're on the shortlist for some significant assignments in the coming years." "Thank you, sir." I also wanted to say. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I know your family situation has been difficult. I saw the wedding photos, saw who was absent. For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than many officers would have." I wasn't sure how to respond. "I had good examples, sir. You had good instincts. Don't undervalue that." He raised his glass. "To Commander Hall. May your career continue to exceed expectations." That night, I came home to find Mark cooking dinner, something he did when he had the time and energy, which wasn't often given his schedule. He was making pasta, badly, and swearing quietly at the stove. "Congratulations, Commander," he said without turning around. "How does it feel?" "Good. Overwhelming." "Right. All appropriate reactions to a promotion." He abandoned the pasta and turned to face me. "I'm proud of you. You say that a lot." "Because it's true a lot." He pulled me into a hug. "You've earned everything you've achieved, Elena. Every rank, every commendation, every bit of respect. You did that yourself." I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and realized he was right. I'd built this career through years of discipline and competence and showing up even when it was hard. My family's absence hadn't stopped me. Their dismissal hadn't diminished my achievements. If anything, I'd done it all despite them, not because of them. The next morning, I woke up to find another letter had arrived. This one was from my mother, sent to our home address somehow, probably obtained through public records or a relative. I opened it while Mark was in the shower. It was 3 pages, handwritten on my mother's expensive stationery. "Dear Elena, I know you're angry with us, and I understand why. We made mistakes. We should have been at your engagement ceremony. We should have asked more questions about Mark before making assumptions. We should have recognized how important your career is to you." It went on like that, carefully worded apologies that still managed to avoid real accountability. Phrases like, "mistakes were made," and "we didn't understand," instead of "I'm sorry," and "we were wrong." The final paragraph was the tell. "Several of my friends have asked why we weren't at your wedding. I've had to explain that we weren't told who you were marrying, that we didn't have all the information. It's been very difficult. I hope we can move past this soon. People are starting to talk." There it was. The real concern. Not that they'd hurt me, but that they looked bad to their social circle. I read the letter twice, then walked to the kitchen and dropped it in the trash. Mark emerged from the bedroom, dressed in his uniform, ready for another day at the Pentagon. He saw me standing by the trash can and raised an eyebrow. "Your mother. How'd you know?" "Vasquez warned me she'd managed to track down our address. I was hoping it wouldn't get through." "It's fine." It didn't say anything I needed to hear. He poured coffee for both of us, and we stood at the kitchen counter in comfortable silence. This had become our morning ritual, 15 minutes together before the chaos of our workdays began, just drinking coffee and existing in the same space. "You know they're not going to stop," he said finally. "I know. And you're okay with that?" I thought about it. I'm okay with setting boundaries and maintaining them. Whether they stop or not is their problem. He smiled. When did you get so wise? I married someone who doesn't negotiate with people who don't respect boundaries. Fair point. He checked his watch. I've got a briefing at 0700. You need anything before I head out? Just this, I said, and kissed him. Brief, routine, grounding. He left, and I finished my coffee alone, looking out the window at the morning light. Somewhere, my mother was probably refreshing her email, waiting for my response. Lydia was probably crafting another social media post about family loyalty. My father was probably advising them both on strategy, approaching family reconciliation like a legal negotiation. Let them wait. Let them strategize. Let them perform for their friends and social circles. I had work to do. Real work that mattered. Intelligence reports to analyze, junior officers to mentor, a career to build with someone who actually showed up. My family had finally seen me, but through a screen, through news articles and social media posts. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to. That was the real transformation. Not the wedding or the blocked numbers or the unanswered letters. It was the realization that I could build a full, meaningful life without their validation. They'd taught me one valuable lesson, though probably not the one they intended. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your value. I'd walked away. And I wasn't looking back. 6 months later, Lydia sent one final message. It came through LinkedIn of all places. She must have exhausted every other avenue and decided to try a professional platform. The message was brief. Elena, I know you've blocked me everywhere else, but I need you to read this. We didn't know who he was. We just thought you were rushing into something. We made a mistake. Can we please talk? I read it 3 times, looking for anything resembling real accountability. But it was the same pattern. We didn't know instead of we were wrong to judge. We made a mistake instead of we hurt you and we're sorry. Even now, even after 6 months of silence, they still couldn't take full responsibility. The message that bothered me most, though, was the implication that they would have acted differently if they'd known Mark's rank. That they would have shown up, would have cared, would have treated my choices with respect, if only they'd known there was something impressive to associate with. That was the core problem. They hadn't valued me. They'd valued what I could offer them: status, bragging rights, social capital. I closed LinkedIn without responding. That night, Mark and I were having dinner with Colonel Harper and his wife, Margaret. They'd invited us to their home in Alexandria, a comfortable townhouse filled with photos from Harper's 30-year career and Margaret's work as a military spouse and advocate. Over dessert, Margaret asked the question I'd been expecting all evening. Have you heard from your family at all? Occasionally, I said. They reach out through different channels. I don't respond. That must be hard. It was at first. Now it's just routine maintenance. Like any other boundary. Harper set down his coffee cup. I've been thinking about this situation since your wedding. And I keep coming back to something my father told me when I first enlisted. What's that, sir? He said that in the military, you'll build 2 families, the one you're born into and the one you choose through service. And sometimes those families overlap, but sometimes they don't. The important thing is recognizing which one actually has your back when things get difficult. I felt my throat tighten. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Career Army, retired as a command sergeant major. He understood loyalty, both giving it and recognizing when it wasn't being returned. Harper looked at me steadily. You've built a strong chosen family, Commander. Don't undervalue that while mourning the family that couldn't show up for you. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. And for what it's worth, we're proud to be part of that chosen family. Later, driving home, Mark was quiet. I could tell he was processing something, working through thoughts the way he did before making strategic decisions. What are you thinking? I asked. About what Harper said. About chosen family. He glanced over at me. I think that's what made our wedding so powerful. It wasn't just about us getting married. It was about our chosen family showing up to witness and support that commitment. 73 people who didn't have to be there. Exactly. They came because they wanted to, not because of obligation or social pressure. He turned onto our street. Your birth family will probably never understand that distinction. No, they won't. Does that bother you anymore? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes. Not as much as it used to. Mostly I just feel sad for them. They're missing out on knowing me, really knowing me, because they're too focused on appearances and status. Their loss, Mark said, echoing the words he'd used the night I told him about the London trip. Their loss, I agreed. 3 months later, I stood in uniform again, this time beside Mark at the Pentagon, receiving a joint commendation for excellence in strategic communications and intelligence integration. It was a rare honor, usually reserved for teams rather than married couples, but our work on a classified project had apparently warranted special recognition. The ceremony was smaller than the wedding, just senior leadership and key personnel. Secretary Rhodes was there again, along with Admiral Richardson and several other flag officers I'd briefed over the past year. When Secretary Rhodes pinned the commendation on my uniform, he said quietly, "Outstanding work, Commander. You and General Hall make quite a team." "Thank you, sir. I mean that. This project could have gone sideways a dozen different ways, but you two navigated every obstacle with professionalism and precision." He stepped back and addressed the room. "This is what right looks like, people. Two excellent officers doing exemplary work while maintaining the highest standards of conduct and performance." The applause was genuine, and for a moment, I felt the full weight of what Mark and I had built together. Not just a marriage, but a genuine partnership. Two careers running parallel, supporting each other, neither one diminished by the other. Reporters were there. Military press, mostly, but also a few civilian journalists who'd been granted access. One of them approached me after the ceremony as I was talking with Chin and Osei. "Commander Hall, can I ask you a question for an article I'm writing?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." "How do you balance marriage and military life, especially when both partners have demanding positions?" I thought about all the easy answers I could give: time management, communication, mutual respect. All true, but not the whole story. "It helps when your partner understands command," I said finally. "When both people understand duty and sacrifice and showing up even when it's difficult. We're not balancing marriage against military life. We're integrating them. They're not separate things competing for attention, they're part of the same commitment to service." The reporter scribbled notes. "And your family? How do they feel about both of you serving in such high-level positions?" The question hung in the air. Chin tense beside me, ready to intervene if needed. But I smiled, genuinely smiled, and said, "My family is very supportive. They understand the importance of this work." It wasn't a lie. My chosen family, the people in that room, the colleagues who'd shown up for my wedding, the mentors who'd invested in my career, they were supportive. They did understand. My birth family wasn't part of that equation anymore. The reporter thanked me and moved on to interview Mark. Chin exhaled slowly. "Smooth," she said. "Practice. You're really okay, aren't you? With all of it?" I looked around the room, at Harper talking with Margaret, at Mark fielding questions from the press, at Osei laughing with Rodriguez about something, at the collection of officers who'd become my community over years of shared service. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." That night, as we walked out into the Pentagon courtyard, I saw my reflection in the glass doors, confident, steady, unbothered. Commander Elena Hall, decorated officer, partner to a major general, part of a team doing meaningful work. My birth family had left to celebrate something worthwhile. They'd made that choice deliberately, publicly, with the full intention of showing me that my engagement didn't matter enough to cancel a vacation. Turns out, I did celebrate something worthwhile. I celebrated a partnership built on mutual respect. I celebrated a chosen family that showed up consistently. I celebrated a life I'd built through discipline and competence and refusing to accept less than I deserved. I celebrated all of that without them, and it was more than enough. Sometimes, when I see photos from their new family trips on social media, they're still posted publicly. Though I only see them when someone else mentions them, I realize they're still performing for each other. Still measuring worth by appearances and status. Still trapped in the same cycle that made them miss my engagement ceremony. That's their cycle. Their performance. Their loss. Mine ended in that chapel at Fort Myer, surrounded by people who chose to show up. And it was the best ending I could have asked for. If you've ever had to set a hard boundary with family, I see you. Drop a comment and tell me what finally made you draw the line. If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the nudge. New chapters every week. Turn on notifications so you don't miss them. Quick questions for you. Have you ever been celebrated only after you became impressive to others? What's the hardest boundary you've kept with family, and did you stick to it? Would you have invited them after the London stunt, or kept the guest list closed? When is blocking calls healthy versus petty? Where's your line? If you're military or partner to one, how do you handle family who don't respect the uniform?